right, Chris. I know everybody knows, but Chris has not just historic tourism America here, but he's in tourist towns throughout America. It gives you a really unique perspective. I'm looking forward to what you've got there. How that?
It definitely does, and I must say I admit being very intimidated, being in the company of people like Jody Smith-Williams, who's my hero, Chris Berg, who my son and daughter went to school with when you're kid about this big, and Allison Higgins. You all know so much more than I do. I guess why I got started in just looking into this is because I grew up in the Florida Keys, actually Delicacy. And I've seen what's happened over the past, 65 years, a long time, and it just started to bother me, worry me, and concern me to a great degree. So I thought I would just give kind of a global and local perspective on the environment, because I think that there is an imperative, as you've heard from all these folks, to do better and do it very quickly. I need to start out by telling you that I am indeed a hypocrite. I drive a gas-guzzling car. I live in a 3,000 square foot house with 2-zone air conditioning. And I think that probably all of us in the audience here are probably somewhat hypocrites to one degree or another. We live in one of the richest countries in the world, and we live like it. If I had a message to give you tonight, it would be about the incredibly wide disparity between people on Earth and how we are consuming, have consumed, and will continue to consume an ever-diminishing amount of resources. I've long held that the main culprit to environmental degradation, and at the other end of that spectrum, environmental stewardship, at the root of the problem is population growth. Last year, somewhere, it just got lost in the news, but somewhere in Bangladesh or some megapolis like Mexico or Calcutta or a fine hospital in New York, a baby was born, and it was the 7 billionth human being to be on Earth. It's a trend as clear as the disastrous effects it portends for the future. It took, since man first stood erect, to 1830 for this planet to have 1 billion human beings on it. And man's ability to procreate was many times outstripped by war, plague, and famine. But up until that time, there was never an insufficient amount of land, resources, or food to sustain this number of people. From the age of the hunter-gatherer to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there's been plenty for everybody. This all changed in the mid-19th century with the discovery of petroleum. Nearly 100 years after, in 1930, there were 2 billion people on Earth. By 1960, there were 3. By 1975, there were 4. By 1989, there were 5. By 1999, there were 6. And last year, 7 billion people. And if you can do the math really quickly, you can see that's accelerating. The discovery of oil did a number of things. First of all, it made man's access to food easier. Food could be brought in on mechanical modes of transportation in urban centers. And people started eating more, they started living longer, and our population grew. Petroleum also fostered the creation of fertilizers and pesticides, which again increased the food supply, and yet again the population grew at an ever-increasing rate. Simply, it's the dramatic and vast growth in world population that's the root cause of virtually all the environmental issues we see today. It has everything to do with the pollution, the proliferation of dangerous chemicals, the way our food is produced, and the disparity of resources. Consider that today, 34,000 children died, and 34,000 children will die tomorrow, in general due to poverty, which results in unclean drinking water, diarrhea, and lack of medicine to combat illnesses that have basically been eradicated in industrialized nations. Consider 1% of the world's population owns 40% of what we euphemistically call the world. Consider that 5% of the world population, the United States, consumes 25% of all fossil fuels. Then consider the fact that traditionally agrarian, vegetarian countries like India, Pakistan, and China are industrializing, becoming meat eaters, and are hungry to consume the luxury items that we take for granted. While everything from antimony to zinc is becoming increasingly rare, and the rainforests of the earth are being destroyed to implement mono-agricultural crops like soybeans and sugar cane, it is difficult, in fact, impossible maybe, for the United States to have a voice at this table. The immediate response is always, you've already despoiled your natural environment to become rich, now it's our turn. In fact, it's a cultural aspect of society that waste has become a symbol of wealth. Our disposable society is a sad source of envy for the rest of the world. At least in this country, Benjamin Franklin's adage, "If waste not, want not," has fallen on deaf ears because there's just so damn much of everything. Yet in a state like Florida, which I grew up in my entire life, is a vast blue-like sponge that has always been a reservoir of water. We now have annual water shortages. I can remember as a child digging a 12-inch hole in my backyard and watch it fill up with water. Venetian pools in Coral Gables used to be known as a drain and fill swimming pool that never used chemicals because every night the water would be drained out and replaced with fresh artesian spring water, no longer. I used to write a column about the environment, which is something I found interesting and still do, enough to study it. But it became evident to me until we experienced, and I got this word from Jody, by the way, and a sustained crisis. People, myself included, will always take the easy way out. Well, I believe we are in at least the beginning of one of those sustained crises. It hasn't come yet in the form of turning on the kitchen sink to the point of being at the longest hose in the world, or a lack of fuel for our cars, which I've experienced, and maybe some of you have too, when we ran out of oil, or we didn't run out, we didn't get it. But it's here in the form of an almost unspoken plague in our health. We drink coffee from styrofoam cups. It is a known fact that styrofoam, which is made from styrene, benzene, and ethylene, when heated, leaches these very chemicals into our bodies. Small children and babies drink from plastic cups that are made clear with phthalates, which also enter their bodies. Milk we buy on our supermarket shelves is produced in vast quantities using BGH or bovine growth hormones. There is not a person in this room, or in this town, or in this state, or in this country, who does not have some or a large amount of chemicals in their tissue from these and other sources. Yet we look around and we wonder why we have an epidemic of cancer, autism, and obesity. In my backyard a while ago, I noticed a bird's nest, and after the eggs hatched, of course. I took the bird's nest down and disassembled it, and this is what I found. Passed it around. The majority of the building materials for the nest were plastic. The chemicals from plastic or petroleum products are now in everything we consume. It's no wonder that it gets into the food supply when you consider there's an area in the Pacific Ocean, bigger than the state of Texas, called the Pacific Gyre, that contains more plastic parts per billion than any other component other than H2O and sodium. Plastic, like diamonds, are forever. It's produced from pellets called nodals, some of which escape into the environment on their own, but they are made into finished products and are exposed to sunlight that photodegrade into smaller and smaller pieces until they are mistaken for krill in the water and become part of the food chain, which we eventually consume. In spite of this, House Bill 7135 recently passed the Florida State Legislature by a wide, if not unanimous margin. What is House Bill 7135? Essentially, it makes it illegal for any city or county in the state of Florida to ban or tax the use of plastic bags. Of course, they were convinced to do so by Associated Industries, which is one of the most powerful lobby groups in the state, made up of large grocery stores, drugstores, and big box retail chains. Plastic bags are easier for them to use, and they don't want them to go away. Americans use in excess of 100 billion plastic bags every year. Most of them go up in smoke and incinerators, but quite a few wind up in our mangroves and nearshore water. Seems like a terrible waste of petroleum, especially when you can use a bag over and over. And by the way, I brought some of these for everyone to take home. Not over my time limit.
If you can finish your thought.
Yeah.
Let me in. With one cheery note, the end takes a while. Better food supply. Both NAFTA and CAFTA have changed the landscape of food production in our country. When you hear about a farm bill, don't kid yourself. It's a food bill. It has nothing to do with farms at all. Farm bills essentially wind up being subsidies for corn production, which in turn makes corn fructose syrup in a nascent industry of ethanol production. Corn fructose syrup is practically in everything you buy in grocery store shelves and has a lot to do with the obesity epidemic in this country. If you really wanted a farm bill, make it a subsidy for fresh fruit, vegetables, and berries. So let's get this. Bring it on. I don't know. There's so much to say here. You know, the protein industry of the United States is essentially controlled by 4 mega companies, and they're giving us exactly what we asked for, and that's exactly what the problem is. The companies like Waste Management, who I greatly admire because they do a good job, like these 4 big companies, we ask them for cheap protein and they give it to us. It doesn't matter that they grow these poor beasts in the most pitiful conditions you've ever seen. They pump them full of steroids and hormones, and they put it on our table so we can have hamburgers and chicken fingers. But you know what's coming is the Chinese, Indians, and Pakistan are going to want it in the same amounts. And when the cows and chickens are produced by the tens of thousands every day to be genetically engineered to mature in 40 days instead of 70, bacteria and pharmaceuticals find their way into our sources of protein. And I mean to sound preachy because I'm probably more guilty than anybody, but frankly, I am scared. I have grandchildren who will have children of their own, and I don't see the leadership necessary to turn all this around. So,
we can probably get into one of the question and answers. It's kind of neat. It wasn't planned in any way, but I think it's really neat that what Ed started out with about creating a need or filling a need is where Chris ended up with. And
that's what I'm
that was a perfect.